DebtBusters has released its latest debt index covering the year 2023. This was a year during which households and businesses had to endure high inflation levels as well as higher interest rates. And while inflation levels slowed in the second half of the year, the pressures on households remain. February is also National Debt Awareness Month. So to give us an overview of what came out of the report and to suggest tips for consumers who are struggling to balance their books, I'm joined by Benay Sager. He's the head of DebtBusters. Thank you very much, Benay, for joining us. So what were the key takeaways from the debt index looking at 2023 with the backdrop that I mentioned about higher inflation and higher interest rates?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. I think the only other thing I would add to what you mentioned is I would say 2023 was probably the most financially difficult year on record in the democratic era in South Africa. I think we really felt this, and I think you mentioned inflation, high interest rates. Also, I think the consistent, crippling levels of load shedding made it almost impossible for any meaningful economic progress and growth for businesses and therefore the income growth for consumers. So I think consumers had a really, really tough time in 2023, and we certainly see that. Having said all that, we also applaud the consumers for doing the right thing and choosing to deal with their debt from a financial sustainability perspective. What we saw was that inquiries were up about 46% compared to the same period a year ago. And, we also see that from a perspective of what the consumer book looks like, as you mentioned, we see higher levels of unsecured debt, about 32% higher compared to a few years ago. And we see that consumers need about 62% of their take-home pay to repay back debt every month. The one pleasing aspect for us was that we saw this was the second quarter, I'm talking about now Q4 2023. It was the second quarter in a row where we saw that 62% decrease ever so slightly. So that's welcome and that's good news. And hopefully we will continue to see that number going down. But I think we also find that particularly hard hit were the consumers who are taking home 20,000 Rand or more and those taking home 5,000 Rand or less. Those two bands seem to have been particularly hard hit both by inflation and the consistently high interest rates. So I think those are some of the themes that have emerged in terms of what we saw.
Yeah. So you've previously indicated to us that many consumers have gone down the debt review route. Just remind us of what that involves. And critically, it also means that you're then barred from borrowing during the period that you're under debt review, right?
Yeah, so debt review or debt counseling, as it's sometimes called, it essentially allows the consumer to work with a registered debt counselor and all the lenders they owe money to repay back their debt in such a way that they have longer time to repay it back. And it's a long process. Normally it takes 3 to 5 years. But what it does is, again, working with the lenders to make sure that the consumer's assets are protected if they were in arrears, that they make a reduced monthly payment, but they have to pay for a little bit longer than they otherwise would have. And in return, like you said, the consumer they need to demonstrate that they can deal with their existing credit situation first before they're allowed to borrow more money. So while they're in debt counseling, they are not allowed to access credit, such as credit cards, and they're not allowed to access new credits, such as opening new accounts. So I think it's something that comes with a trade-off. I think it has to be really well considered, really importantly considered by the whole family if somebody's thinking about it. But for those who really don't have another option, and we often say another loan is not an answer, because what happens is if you go and get another loan, you're just delaying the difficult situation. So we urge consumers to actually deal with the difficult situation, understand their credit, understand their debt, understand their debt repayments by using some of the online tools, come to terms with it, and then they can make the best decision.
Yeah. So, Benay, with it being National Debt Awareness Month, what do consumers need to be mindful of, especially to avoid a situation where they get into too much debt in the first place?
Yeah, I think the first thing to be mindful of is know your credit. To know how much of your monthly repayment is going to debt repayments. So to put this, we launched a new tool on our website. Consumers can go and understand what that is. It's free. But at the same time, they need to know how much of their income is being spent on other things, for example, electricity, airtime, and things like that. I would also say make sure as a family that you're looking at every single cent that you are spending, whether it's cash or credit-based. Understand where you stand and really ask the tough question, am I bringing enough money this month to cater for all the expenses and all my obligations that I have to pay? And if the answer is no, then I think the lifestyle change is required. It's a difficult decision, but we would urge the consumers to really come to terms with that. Establish your financial situation during this National Debt Awareness Month.
Yeah. Benay, it sounds like your key message is budget, budget, budget. Even if you have to write it down at home, write down exactly what you need to buy so that you don't buy the frivolous things. Benay, thank you so much for your time. That was Benay Sager. He's the head of DebtBusters.